Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report, and coming up on today's show, we're going to be looking at some Christian Wilkins replacements if he ends up getting the second surgery that he needs, which would put him out for the entire season. I think you could also look at this as, because we know we're probably not going to get 100% of Wilkins at any point this entire season, could Pete Carroll, could John Spytek potentially look out there, potentially on the open market, whether it be free agency or some trade candidates, or could you just look at some potential Wilkins replacements on this Raiders roster? So that's really what I'm going to try to outline today here on this episode, because let's face it, it's going to be a team effort. Christian Wilkins, those type of players don't grow on trees. And if you're going to try to replace somebody like that, you need to at least be able to do it with a multitude of different players. So if you do not know what the latest is right now on the Raiders star defensive tackle, he underwent foot surgery on October 8th. 2024. That Jones fracture surgery was supposed to take about 3 to 4 months to heal. Unfortunately, we're going on 9 months now, and Wilkins still is not 100% healthy. I was told by a source last week that Wilkins does in fact need a second surgery. However, Wilkins is going to try to play through the injury, which he has the ability to do so. Now, I will say this, the Raiders doctors are recommending him getting the second surgery, thus putting him out for the season, but Wilkins does not want to do that. So since we're kind of in a situation right now as an organization, and it's June 24th, I'm going to sit up here and just break down some of the biggest potential Wilkins replacements that I think Raiders fans would want to know about. Let's first talk about replacing Wilkins, though, on the silver and black, because I do think the most likely scenario, I don't think it's the Raiders going out and signing somebody. I don't think it's the Raiders going out and trading for somebody. I think the most likely scenario is the Raiders, they look at what they have on this squad, on this team, and whether it's from the defensive tackle standpoint or whether they're going to look at it from a defensive end standpoint, I do really believe because Wilkins wants to try to play through this injury, and maybe he ends up doing it, maybe he gets through training camp, we're going to wait and see. But because the Raiders are so confident in their defensive line and because they have so much confidence in Rob Leonard and Patrick Graham, I could see the Raiders just trying to replace Wilkins with somebody that they already have on this roster. So the big-time question here is this. Which current Raider needs to step up the most if Christian Wilkins is out? And maybe you don't even got to look at it if he's out or not. To me, if I know I'm not getting 100% of Christian Wilkins, somebody needs to step up, and I'm going to tell you who I think that number one player here is in just a moment. Before I do, let me know who you think that guy is. Let's go here. I'm going to go from 5. I'm going to work my way down to 1 here for the replacements for Wilkins on the Raiders. First name I'm going to throw out there is Jonah Laulu, who, young guy, could kind of play the nose tackle role, definitely a little bit of an undersized dude, but overall, he is going to be somebody that has to step up on the interior. Let's go to number 4. It's going to be Tonka Hemingway, and realistically, you could put both rookies up here, whether it be Hemingway, whether it be J.J. Pegues. The reason why I have Tonka ranked higher than Pegues is simply because he was drafted in the 4th round compared to where Pegues was drafted in the 6th. Let's go to number 3 here, Adam Butler. Re-signed a 3-year, $16.5 million deal very early this offseason. And I almost wonder if because the Raiders knew what was happening with Wilkins, if that's the reason why they decided to bring back Butler and why they made Butler a priority. But he's your number 1 defensive tackle on this squad right now. Coming in here at number 2, it's going to be Leki Fotu, and this is more just from a true size standpoint. Wilkins is a gigantic human being. The biggest defensive tackle that we have that I think legitimately ends up making this roster is Fotu. And if all his job is to take on double teams, that way it frees up other players, well, then that's a big role that he's going to play. But this might be a little bit of a surprising answer. Let me walk you through why I believe the number 1 Christian Wilkins replacement for the Las Vegas Raiders this season will end up being Tyree Wilson. Again, I say that whether Wilkins is healthy or whether Wilkins gets that second surgery and he's not going to be out there. And I say that because I know Wilson could play defensive end and defensive tackle. When the Raiders went out and drafted Pegues and Hemingway, both of those players are also a little bit of tweeners. I've also heard probably more than I have since the 2023 draft. You think about the Eagles winning a Super Bowl with Jalen Carter, and think about the way the NFL views a player like Jalen Carter compared to the way that the organizations view somebody like Tyree Wilson. You know for a fact that if Wilkins is unable to play, more and more people are going to go, well, it's just another reason that we should have got Jalen Carter at 7. And looking at it now, yeah, there's no doubt about it. That's the route you should have gone. Because Wilson is entering a contract year and he's going to get more playing time, this is going to be the year where I really think it's time to put up or shut up. And if you were to ask me, out of all the players on the Raiders, who do I think is the most important that needs to take that next step on the defensive line? I do think it's actually Tyree Wilson. Here's some other honorable mentions that I'll throw in, and realistically, you could say any person on the defensive line, any player on the Raiders defense is going to have to step up. Hell, I've made arguments that, you can argue it's the linebackers, the free safeties, the corners, but I really was just talking about defensive linemen on this show. Max Crosby, he's got to take that next step. Pegues, Malcolm Kuntz, Zach Carter, I would say are the other most important players on this Raiders team if Wilkins is unable to go. Coming up next here on the show, let's look at some free agent replacements for Wilkins. And some of you have heard maybe some of these names that I've brought up before. Now, I am adding some extra names because coaching connections matter to this organization. If you didn't know that we're 100 subs away, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications. I'm trying to grow this Raiders Report family. And I always say the word family, and sometimes I get a chuckle from here and there, but I do really believe that y'all are my second family, and I always try to give you the best content humanly possible. So if you're not already, join the fam and subscribe. Let's go to the first potential free agent Wilkins replacement. I'm going to throw out the name Quinton Jefferson. And again, if you're looking for Christian Wilkins-type players in the middle of June, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. I'm looking for more of just the easy connection, and in my mind, essentially, if I'm going, well, I need a player like a Zach Carter or a Jonah Laulu or a bottom-of-the-roster rookie to step up, well, then that position is available. I think Quinton Jefferson could fill out that 6th defensive tackle on a roster because of his coaching connections with Pete Carroll. He played 5 seasons with Carroll from 2016 to 2019, also played in 2022. He was a member of the Las Vegas Raiders in 2021, very well respected by Max Crosby. 32 years old, played 252 snaps last season, and I know that he's not as talented as somebody like John Jenkins and how good Jenkins was for this team, but if you're the Raiders with how young you are, bringing in a veteran, I don't think is a bad idea. Let's go to another name here. Jonathan Bullard, defensive tackle, has played in 34 games and started in 31 the past 2 seasons, which I think if you're trying to replace somebody like Wilkins, I'm looking for availability, and I need somebody that I can rely on and count on. I'm not saying to replace Wilkins, I need an extra body in case one of my guys does end up going down. But I do think back-to-back solid seasons with the Minnesota Vikings, some people might argue, hell, his 2 best years that he's had in his career. But he did play underneath Pete Carroll in 2020 with the Seattle Seahawks. And when you're just talking about bodies, right, like 41 tackles last season, 44 tackles the season before that. Those are his 2 highest tackle numbers in the National Football League. So because of the coaching connection and because of just the, I'll say, 2 solid years these past 2, Bullard's a name to keep in mind. Let's go to another name here that I'm going to throw out. It's Austin Johnson. And Johnson has played in 32 games and started 18 the past 2 seasons. 2 seasons with Patrick Graham from 2020 to 2021, and a career-high 72 tackles and 3.5 sacks in 2021 underneath Patrick Graham. So in terms of Johnson, I do think that he's a really decent depth option. I'm a Penn State guy, and this is more of just a big body dude. Because you look at Johnson and his size compared to the 2 other defensive tackles that I just mentioned in Jefferson and another player that I just mentioned in Bullard, they don't quite have the size somebody does like Johnson. So if you're still looking for a little bit more of that nose tackle, just somebody to keep in mind. Let's go to the final name here, and he's not a defensive tackle, but if it was up to me, the number 1 player that I would go out and try to sign right now to add to my defensive line would be Jadeveon Clowney. 15 sacks the past 2 seasons, and he can play defensive end. I would allow him to play defensive end, and I would rotate Clowney, I would rotate Tyree Wilson, and I would rotate those players as much as humanly possible. Just that way I get the best defensive line on the field. Because in my mind, if I'm going Max Crosby, Adam Butler, Malcolm Kuntz, is it better with Bullard? Is it better with Jefferson? You put Jadeveon Clowney on that line, and to me, he's the top 4 defensive lineman that we have for that reason. I would go out and try to get him. And he was really solid in 2019. with Pete Carroll, an 87.3 overall PFF grade, the second highest of his career. And when you look at the numbers that are up on screen, he was also able to find pay dirt twice. Was able to get 31 tackles, 3 sacks. And I get it. A lot of times sacks have been the number that have been thrown out there in regards to Clowney because he hasn't always been able to get them. But over the past 2 years, he's been able to do it. In that 2019 season, he had 650 snaps, a pass rush grade that was solid, a run defense grade that was solid. But again, second highest PFF grade of his career at 87.3. And he's also coming off a season where he had 5.5 sacks on a shitty Carolina Panthers team. Like, I look at coaching connection, I look at players available, I think about how much money the Raiders have in salary cap, and if the Silver and Black are legitimately concerned about not having Wilkins, I would say adding Jadeveon Clowney to the defensive line to help replace Wilkins makes the most sense instead of the Raiders going out and signing a defensive tackle to replace Christian Wilkins. I hope that makes sense. Coming up, though, next here, maybe the most fun part of the show, let's look at some potential trade replacements in regards to Wilkins. Now, what I did here is I reached out to the Chat Sports gang, and I asked, hey, who's some defensive tackles that you could potentially be seeing on the trade block? Give me some names thrown out there. I'll share the names that I received. Before I get into that, though, if you're looking for a brand new Raiders 4th of July shirt, go to chatsports.com/RaidersUSA. That link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments and down in the description of today's show. I always sit and I wonder if during certain holidays, I think 4th of July and St. Patty's Day to me are the same conflicts that I have where I want to wear something red, white, and blue, but I'll be honest, I don't have a lot of red, white, and blue things. I also always love to rock my team, so if you're a Raiders fan and you're like, you know what? It's the 4th of July weekend. It's a Friday, and I'm trying to get down with the nation, but I'm also trying to show some of my USA love. Chatsports.com/RaidersUSA. If you know you're going to do something on the 4th of July and you also want to rock your Raiders, I got some shirt options available. Also, there's a bunch of other random things that you can get at that link available. Chugs and I were laughing at some of them today, but there's also a lot of Salute to Service hats, Salute to Service sweatshirts, a lot of good deals revolving that. So please go check it out. I think you guys would definitely like it if you're trying to wear Raiders gear on 4th of July. Let's go to some Raiders trade candidates. The first name that I got to put up here is Trey Hendrickson. And I'll be honest, I would be shocked if the Silver and Black pulled off this deal just because Hendrickson wants to make $30 million a year. I don't think that he's going to get $30 million, at least not from the Raiders personally. But if you wanted to go about it the same way I just mentioned Jadeveon Clowney, where you're like, all right, if we're going to lose a defensive tackle, how can I just get the best pass rush humanly possible? Getting the guy that's got 35 sacks over the past 2 seasons, probably a halfway decent way to do that. Another name here is going to be Tim Settle, and some of y'all might be like, oh, I remember that name. I used to mention Settle a lot when he was with the Washington Commanders because he was buried on that depth chart. And Chugs put out a tweet, and if you guys can go check it out, I also commented on it at Mitchell Renz 365 at Jeremy Chugs. To me personally, I do think Settle would be a good fit on the Raiders. It just comes down to price tag. For me personally, I would offer a 6th-round pick, which doesn't sound like it's enough for Houston. Let's go to another name here, Andrew Billings, which, funny enough, also a former Raider and 6'1", 311-pounder with the Chicago Bears right now. The Bears have done a few things in the draft and be a free agency that might just bump him down. Also in the final year of his deal, so if he knows that, hey, I'm 27, I'm not going to have an opportunity to come back, maybe the Raiders make a move to go out and get him. I know that in-divisional trades never happen, but I'll also say this. The Raiders also traded the defensive tackle named Neil Farrell Jr. to the Kansas City Chiefs for a 6th-round pick, and that wasn't very long ago. In fact, that was just a few years ago. The John Franklin Myers rumors have been circulating. The Broncos, I do think, are looking to try to move on from him. But then I also look at it from the Raiders' standpoint. Brian Stark. Brian Stark comes from the Denver Broncos organization, is a big-time front office member right now for us. If you told me we could get him for a 7th-round pick in 2026, I do think the Raiders would at least pick up the phone, and I think that they would entertain that option. Quite frankly, I think they'd be dumb not to. Another name here, and I always struggle with his last name, David Onyemata. Just like I just mentioned earlier with Franklin, the Atlanta Falcons have been adding some talent to that defensive line, and he's also been linked to multiple trade rumor articles out there that I've seen on the internet. The final name I believe I'm going to put on here is John Jenkins. And Jenkins signed with the Baltimore Ravens, and when he was with the Ravens, This was one of those moves where I was like, man, if the injury around Wilkins at the time is as major as what it is, I wonder if they pick up the phone and they try to bring Jenkins in just because of all his coaching connections and player connections. But I'll tell you this right now, if Baltimore said, hey, give me a 7th-round pick for Jenkins, I would do it if I was the Raiders. I know he's 35 years old, but he fits exactly what the silver and black are looking for on the defensive tackle spot. Quite frankly, I would rather have John Jenkins on this team than Leki Fotu, and I don't even think it's all that close. If you made it this far in the video and you want to give me a follow on IG or on Twitter, I am at Mitchell Renz 365, and again, I am not reporting that Christian Wilkins is done for the season. I am simply just telling you a source reached out to me last week and told me that Wilkins does in fact need a second surgery. If he gets that second surgery, he will be out for the entire season, though he is going to try to thug it out. He's going to try to play through it. My point is this. If we're not going to have 100% healthy Christian Wilkins, you can either look to replace him now or at least get a few guys' names in the back of your mind in case he does get that second surgery. That way we're ready to rock and roll for the entire season.